And now here's our featured presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Hilda Churechan. I am the Executive Director of the Society of Decision Professionals. I would like to welcome you today to the Society's first strategic town hall presentation. I would now like to introduce you to the speakers you will be hearing from today. Our first speaker for today is Larry Neal. Larry is a founding fellow of SDP and is currently serving as past president, having held the offices of president and vice president, president-elect. He also served as an SDP board member and was the initial chair of the Certification Council. In 2015, Larry retired from Chevron Corporation after 38 years, 25 of those years supporting Chevron's award-winning decision analysis team. Larry was also Boy Scout leader for 13 years. He lives with his wife of 37 years, Judy, in Vacaville, California. They have 2 grown children, 1 grandson, and another grandson arriving in May of next year. How exciting, Larry, and welcome to today's town hall meeting.
Thanks, we're really excited too.
Our next speaker for today's presentation is Ellen Cooper-Smith. Ellen is currently serving as president of the SDP and was the initial chair of the SDP Program Council. She is the founder and president of Decision Frameworks, an international consulting, training, and software practice focused on building and supporting decision quality capability around the world. Prior to forming Decision Frameworks in 1999, Ellen worked at Conoco 16 years, the last 5 of which as the Director of Decision and Risk Analysis. She is a board-certified decision analysis fellow, a professional engineer, a published speaker on decision-making and decision quality implementation, and has headed up a global practice of decision analysis for 22 years. Ellen, welcome to today's town hall meeting.
Thank you, Hilda.
You'll also be hearing today from Jim Driscoll. Jim Driscoll is currently serving as SDP's Vice President and President-elect. He joined Intel in 1999 and has led Intel's Decision Quality Program Office since he founded the group in 2012. Jim and his team of decision professionals act as the corporate-wide owners, teachers, and lead practitioners of decision quality at Intel. Over the years, they have taught hundreds of Intel employees the basics of high-quality decision-making, decision analysis, and effective facilitation. Prior to being elected as SDP's vice president, Jim served on SDP's board of directors and was an active member of the strategy subcommittee. Jim has twice served on the panel of examiners for the Rafa Howard Award for Organizational Decision Quality. Jim, welcome to today's town hall meeting.
Thank you, Hilda.
And now, without any further delay, I'd like to turn today's presentation over to our first speaker, Larry Neal. Larry, you have the floor.
Thanks, Hilda. Welcome, everybody. Glad you could make it here. We're pretty excited about holding this first strategic plan town hall. There's been a lot of hard work gone on over it. And but before I launch off into my main slides, I would like to request that you do use the question box on your screen to send us questions. We hope to get your feedback through those questions, so please feel free. We will try to answer every one of them. If we run out of time towards the end of our hour, we will remain online for those interested to continue answering questions if there are any remaining. Okay, next slide, please. So Ellen and Jim and I are here to fill you in on what we've been doing, what the society has been doing. We've been working about 12 to 18 months, somewhere in there, on this strategic plan, and we want to fill you in on it. My role here in this first part is to give you a grounding and an understanding of why we're doing it. Ellen will follow up and give you a lot more details on the elements of the plan that we're working on, and then Jim is going to bring us to closure with how we see this thing coming together in the future years. So next slide, please. So this is my section here. Next slide. So first off, the planning process, and I'd like to make a quick comment here. When I first came in the door as Vice President, President-elect, it was something that really hit me very, very hard when things. One is that you are amazed at the passion and and the dynamics of the people that are volunteering their time and working on the society's events, things like that. And it's a little bit overwhelming. Even though I had been on the board, even though I had held a council chair, I really didn't have an appreciation about how big and how dynamic and how passionate this organization was. And as I thought about it, there were two things that came to mind. And the first one was thinking about the members as individual agents, and every one of those individuals was working on something that they thought was important. And then when I thought about the aggregate of all of these agents working on what they thought was important, to me, that told me in aggregate what our members thought that the society should be. And that's why we launched off on what we're about to talk about, this planning process. We started the subcommittee that Jim was a part of late winter last year. This was at the culmination of some data gathering, and that subcommittee, we had all the officers on there. We also had board members on there. We collected data from the board of directors, the executive committee, past presidents, and every single council. So we went out there, and our thought was that the data from the councils would be germane to what the greater population of members thought. And from all of this, through a framing session, we put together what I'm calling a future state narrative, and I wanted to point that word out. We haven't we haven't drawn a line in the sand. We haven't put a stake in the ground. We have described what we think, based on all of this information, that future state would be. And so this is amorphous, this is changing, we expect it to change, but it's a direction and we're moving in there. We've put together some strategic themes, and in my past at Chevron, we called it a shaping curve. Here's where we are, here's where we want to be, how do we get there? And that's what you'll see today. So we documented everything, and in June, the board of directors endorsed our recommendations. So the next slide. So the current state and where we think we are. Now this is probably pretty accurate. We know where we're at, we know what's going on, and we did a lot of work to make sure of that. And the first thing is the councils are proactive. And we chose that word very specifically. They're more than active. They're out there searching out opportunities and bringing them to the board, bringing them to the executive committee. So it's much more than just being reactive. They're being proactive, and very much so. We have, at the point of we wrote these slides, we had one active chapter, and there's 3 under consideration at that time. Ellen's going to add some more detail for you on that. We kicked off the first technical interest group, and that, again, Ellen will talk a bit more about that, but that's an element that is going to allow us to provide very topic-specific networking for our members. We have the shared decision-making. You saw the slide on that. One's been held, one's ready to go. We've given away 3 Rafa Howard Awards, but with that, we don't have a lot of companies out there actively pursuing it, so we would like to see that change. The Hero Awards, I announced that last spring. We're still working to get those things implemented. We also have started some strategic partnerships. The idea that there are other organizations, not necessarily decision analytic in nature, but perhaps consumers of decision analysis and decision quality. And we'd like to partner up with them. One of them that we did do through the Houston chapter with the Society of Petroleum Engineers, and wrote a joint document on how companies can jointly use DQ principles. The DAG conference is going very, very well. We've had record attendance. It is profitable. But on the flip side of that, and I put this here, the word marginal on our financial status, we're doing well. We just don't have a lot of spending money, if you will, to spend on things that we would like to do to grow and expand. So we would like to change that. We're working on sponsor benefits to improve them. We did lose several during the oil and gas downturn. That did put some pressure on us, but we've been able to recover from that. And lastly on this slide, we are considering the application for a 501c3 status with the IRS. That's a nonprofit status. We're currently C6, which means that we're considered like a Chamber of Commerce or a business promoter. So going to C3 is a much broader classification, and it also qualifies us for a number of grants and matching programs for corporations. So that's why we're thinking about that, and we're actively working on that. Next slide, please. So where we think we want to be, again, this is the aggregate of all of the activities and the feedback we got. One, clearly we want to see the utilization DQ improved and awareness, and that we are growing, and growing in ways of providing opportunities for members, providing services to communities, etc. We really hope membership has grown substantially by the time we get to this future state. And we said financial reserves adequate to fund new activities. And basically, as an indicator, that is that occasionally we have to hire additional staff to help us do these things. We would love to be in a position to do that. Chapters and interest groups meet regularly. So far, that's showing a lot of promise, and we're hoping here that with the chapters, we can add a strong element of local to our support of decision professionals. Again, we want to grow these strategic partnerships, enhance them, and perhaps even these other organizations would provide a, how should I say, a portal for individuals that have a particular interest that they want to pursue. We also have a lot of folks that are interested in bringing decision analysis and DQ to academic curricula at all levels, from elementary school to the university. There's a lot of thought. There's other organizations out there that are working on that now. Perhaps there's partnerships that can be done, but there's a lot of interest, and Frank Cook and Amy Stranieri are doing a wonderful job up in Oregon as an example. We really want to get to the point where the SDP awards are recognized, valued, and people pursue them. And lastly, that we expand our offerings such that we can have additional conferences beyond DAG to serve members, perhaps in certain locations or with topic-centric opportunities. So the next slide, please. These are the 6 strategies that we came up with in a very broad brush. We call this Achieving SDP's Promise. There's 3, we called them sustainability strategies. These are the things, the foundational things that enable us to do what we do. One is visibility and marketing of DADQ. We've got a lot of different things out there. Ellen will fill you in on some of those things. Organizational strategy, we want to make sure that we've got the right organization in place to support whatever we choose to do as a society. We don't want to force fit things, so we want to have the ability and consciously look at how we have the organization structured. And lastly is a business strategy, to be more formal in our financial planning, in our financial forecasting. We want to get a little bit better at that. The value delivery strategies, these are for members, these are for sponsors, this is our communities. First off is the conferences. We talked about having numerous conferences, events, knowledge sharing. Decisionpedia is a really good example of that. Perhaps a speakers bureau where we provide speakers in locations to address various audiences. We want to step up our social media and web strategy. There's a lot out there. There's a lot of people that use that as their primary source of information. So we want to participate more fully in that. And lastly, we would like to step up and think about our certification or recognition strategy and see what we can do to expand that, to broaden that, to enhance its value to practitioners and perhaps non-practitioners as well. Next slide, please. So putting this all in a nutshell and to bring it all together so that Ellen can give you some details. This is we don't see this as a one and done sort of an exercise. We're hoping that this will be a continuous exercise that we're continuously improving over time, and as we learn, as we did with the downturn in the oil and gas, we were a little bit too exposed to the oil and ast industry relative to our financials, and we're trying to change that. We don't want that to happen. We want to be more diverse. So in this year, we're reframing, we're setting the stage, just kind of as a subtitle. We definitely want to support and monitor activities that are in flight. We want to make sure that these activities that we are participating in and are supporting are indeed meeting the needs of the membership and the sponsors. We want to secure those sponsor benefit improvements. We've made some improvements, but we've got more to go. We want to keep in contact with our current sponsors and to listen to those that aren't sponsors to see if there are things that we could provide that would be of interest to them. And then the last bullet here, and I want to spend just a few minutes on this, is that review the mission, vision, and organization and update if deemed necessary. Again, we want to make sure that everybody understands this isn't a preconceived activity in terms of what it's going to yield. We want to take a look at it. One of the things that struck us as we began this journey on the 501c3 status is that there are aggregators of information out there that bring all of these nonprofits together, and if you don't have this information out there, you don't have something that's compelling, the only thing that represents you in the eyes of these potential contributors is your IRS tax return. And that's one of the things we want to do, is to make sure that this is all up there and putting our best face forward and supporting the strategies that we are now looking at. Next year, you're going to see a lot more in terms of thinking these things through, gathering information, adjusting where necessary. We're going to put some metrics together, and but we want to focus those metrics on minimizing ambiguity, risk, and resource drain. There's a lot of questions. Okay, well, why are we doing this? What is this for? This is really good. We want to make sure that we very much understand that. We're going to put these metrics and procedures in place. Continue to evolve DAG, and that word evolve, that was put in there. We want to make sure that DAG is serving the needs of the members that attend, as well as the sponsors that support us. So as we see things, as we come across new opportunities, we may experiment. And there's a dual track in DAG 2018, which is one of those experiments. So we're going to continuously look at DAG and try to make it better from year to year. And then lastly, in 18, initiate additional outreach efforts, certification, marketing plans, awards. We want to get out there and be more proactive on this, and we're putting together communications plans and are actually considering changes to certain councils to help us do that. And then lastly, in the 2019 to 2020, evaluate and adjust. This is where it gets a little bit mushy. We won't kid you. We got to see where we're going to be when we get there, but we're not going to quit. We're going to keep doing this year after year and make sure that we're on the right track to get to what that future state is, and that future state may evolve in and of itself. So that is the end of what I was going to speak of, and I would like to hand off to Ellen so that she can give you some of the details around the things that we're talking about.
Thank you, Larry. So as you all can see, we have a lot we wanted to do. I stepped in as VP while this was all evolving under Larry, and I can't thank him enough. I think my term would be completely different had we not decided to do a strategic plan. But this year is, I would say, way busier than even his last slide suggested. I have an amazing board, and we have wonderful councils, and I'd like to talk to you about how we're taking this plan, which is super high level, and kind of putting some definition to it, which is involving a lot of our DADQ. Hilda. Okay, so we had this wonderful plan, and the board approved it right at the end of Larry's terms, and what we really realized was we got to figure out what exactly implementation would mean. And to do that, I did something I just referred to with the board called strategy mapping. We took every slide of the plan and kind of mapped it out. And what we saw was there's really kind of three elements of the strategic plan. It fell into three easy buckets. One, or Nikes, And the Nikes are things that really we can just do. There's not a lot of contention. A lot of councils and board members are doing it. They were easy to get started. Still take time and effort, but not a lot more thinking and testing. The next bucket I called pilots. These are elements of the plan that we think we want to do. They're in progress, some of them we're kicking off this year, but really there's going to be a decision point for them after we observe and test those particular strategic elements. The third are what I referred to as strategy build-outs. They really need definition. A small group needs to think through what the problem is, what it could be, what are all the issues, what are the alternatives, and then come back to the board and make some initial recommendations. So really, they are more immature than the Nikes and the pilots. Well, this is going to be a lot of work. So with the board, we kind of work through assigning different elements. Some things you're going to see are an action. They could be passed directly to the board, directly to council right now. Others, we needed to form some strategy sub-teams. I'll talk a little bit more about it, but the strategy sub-teams could be within a council or they may be multi-council membership. And then to make sure that we have something to end my term with and carry over into Jim's, we've given ourselves a year from when Larry presented and the board approved the plan. So in May and June, the board should be seeing lots of recommendations and discussions on how the Nikes how the pilots and the strategy build-outs are progressing. They may not all be done, but we want to have first phase recommendations and heads up around those. All right. Okay, so let's talk about all the Nikes that are underway, and this is probably a subset, but one of the first things we did, and it was already happening, but we've really worked hard to shift the role of the board of directors and the councils from operational to strategic alignment. We've got a high-level strategy, and we now have passed the elements that belong where they belong, and we have taken that and said, continue executing what you're executing, councils, which is where all the work gets done, but make sure we've got it strategically aligned, and where we don't, work the strategy to figure that out. To do this, we have strengthened the role of the board of director liaisons to these SDP councils. I think in the last newsletter I laid out how many councils that we have. So each board of director is basically a liaison, and what we've gone and said is, we've said each liaison is really meant to be and play the role for their 3 years on the board as the strategic right-hand man to the council leads. And they go to the councils, they work with the councils if there are strategic issues and plans to be worked, and they work with the leads to make sure that the strategic alignment and any concerns are constantly communicated back and forth. We are building up and may be reorganizing some of the councils where it's needed. So as the strategy work unfolds, we will continue to look to say, do we have the right councils? And if we don't, what strategic shifts might we recommend over to the board? Many of our councils are fine right now. Some of them are too lean, and we know that. Some of them are lean, and through the strategy exercises, we'll be able to better define them, and then there will be a big campaign to beef them up. But right now, we are looking at helping any councils that need help, and then working with them on their strategies, and then we will be looking at if there needs to be any adjustments in the council. The other thing we're doing is really focusing on building on what Larry was saying, laying the foundation for an increase in different types of revenue streams into SDP. So that could mean different events, solo events, joint events. It may mean through different things we can do that will entice sponsor and sponsor benefits, both operator sponsor and service provider sponsors. So everything we're doing, we're looking at how can we do it and how will it help strengthen our organization to be able to fulfill the mission and the vision. Hank is our financial treasurer, and he's building a financial plan and setting targets for sustainability. So it won't be a one-year financial plan, but we are already seeing a lot of increased activity, and with that needing support, and with that feeding the ideas around our financial plan and the targets and what's going to be needed. A lot of activity that I'll be pointing out is going on. And what we are noticing is, although Bill Klimek was very good at putting our first policy and procedures document in place, which we are always updating, thank you, Bill, we are missing processes and or procedures, and when we notice it, the board and the executive council are working to put them in place and asking for your patience. I know I've had some conversations in the past few weeks with some of our imploding chapters, and those people who are working hard to get new chapters in place. We're working quickly with an as a complete volunteer organization to put missing procedures in place and help and be an enablement. We also are working very hard, and I say this very firmly, on strengthening the sense of community within SDP service providers and operators. We are a community, and we are rich because of people practicing and companies practicing decision quality in their organizations, and also the service providers who are practicing and helping organizations continue to utilize decision quality. And we are working that rift, we are crossing the chasm, and we hope that those of you in the organization see the importance of this and see the changes that we are working very hard to make. Next. I'd like to talk about our pilots. So many of these pilots were ongoing, and new pilots are burgeoning up through the strategic plan. The mentoring program was started a year ago and are coming on to a year ago. I don't know if I have the dates right, from the membership program, and we're expecting a look back from them to tell us how well it's doing, what their lessons learned on, and where we're going. So we really are looking at the mentoring program probably as one of the first pilots to be making some recommendations to the board in this first half of 2018. We do have a technical interest group. The first one that's being tried and true, it's on scenario thinking, scenario planning, and they're working hard to find a global time and continue to meet. They will probably be reporting back to us, I hope, before May, June, and we'll see if other technical interest groups will make sense and what the other lessons learned are. But they've worked very hard to get that going, and we're very proud of that. Sponsor organizations will have this year displays and tables at conferences. As part of the sense of community, this is a means to share knowledge, to share what's going on in the world. These could be sponsor organizations that are operator sponsors. These can be sponsor organizations that are service provider sponsors. But this is part of the sense of community that we're moving forward, and we are piloting that. We are going to pilot at a very small amount, a parallel event in the annual conference. We've never had a parallel track, and we wanted to test one parallel track out of a 2-day conference to see how that might service the organization as a whole. Do we see our annual conference always having multiple legs? I don't think so. I don't know in the near term, but we really wanted to test it, and we were able to do so cheaply this year. And so the Program Council and the DAG program have worked hard on that. We are piloting multiple days of courses at the annual conference. It's less than 5 years ago we said, oh, let's test a course to see if the community benefits and if it also helps sustain the organization. A half-day conference burgeoned into a pilot of a full day. I mean, a half-day of courses has burgeoned into a full day of courses. Then it's burgeoned into multiple courses in that one day. And this time we are testing 2 days ahead of the conference for those who want to participate and see how that goes. Growing SDP chapters. We actually now have 2 official chapters with one super on the horizon. So Calgary on the 20th of November They put their bylaws together. They've been meeting for the last quarter, the third quarter of 2017. They held their first event. They had plus or minus 30 people. They had multiple presentations, and then they all went out and had a wonderful social. So we're very excited. So they've joined the ranks of the Houston chapter. On the horizon, we've been working with some wonderful people in Seattle. So they are having their first Do We Want to Be a Chapter meeting either in December or January. And they've gone out with a solicitation of interest, and we're trying to help connect those people in Seattle to help those chapters get started. So very, very exciting. In addition to that, there's been other locations that have been testing and calling. We have a lead. Laura Keating has agreed to let her years as a SDP board member help with our chapter strategy and a launch kit. So she is working that heavily. We're broadening the target for the annual conference, meaning that we are hopeful over the next few years to entice not only decision professionals, but potentially project managers, leaders, teams that are interested or practicing decision quality in their organization, and to make this conference useful for both, a place where the community can grow and we can share and use decision quality more broadly across the globe. We do have the Joint Organization Conference. The SDM2, or the 2018 one, is going to be run in February this year, and that is our second event outside of DAG, where people are working very hard to see how this can work. How can it work when we have another society working with us to hold a conference? So there will be lessons learned and recommendations on SDM and joint conferences and procedures in general before the end of my term. Okay, so now let's talk about the strategy build-outs. And what we really saw was there were many elements that needed more detail, but some of them fall cleanly within the remit of an existing council. And so what I've got listed here were things that clearly need a strategy presented and where they get to by, let's say, May or June, but they fall under the remit of a council that already exists. So for certification, we do have a new leader there, Paul Wicker, and for certification, they are going to look at the strategic question of, should we have just one kind of certification around decision quality or more, and how can we entice people to want to be certified? So that clearly falls under that council, and we will be hearing back from them. On awards, Sandy Roble has taken over the awards council, and her remit is to help launch the strategy along with her liaison on her council on new awards, and we have a nice new ODQ assessment tool, and how to get that communicated and utilized for the benefit of the community and organizations interested in decision quality and building that up within their organization. Membership is working on growth. They've got some pilots, and they are also going to be participating on some of the joint council strategy efforts that I will be talking about. It is within membership that we are working on enhancing the benefits. Outreach and communication has a lot of remits that fall clearly under them today. So a younger group of interested folk in outreach and communication are going to launch a social media strategy, trying to understand with a volunteer organization, what kind of social media do we have the time, energy, and effort to do, and how do we start bringing social media into a bigger part of what we communicate around the world. They're also going to fall under joint organization conferences and initiatives. So when we're looking at SDM and any other joint initiatives that might involve an event or anything like that, we need some procedures, we need some decision criteria, we need just some thought and maybe a starter kit around how to do that. And then they've had ongoing this idea of a speakers bureau. We want to have a little more understanding. So that'll fall under outreach and communication by itself. Next slide. So we saw clearly there were some strategic elements that are super important, but really don't involve one particular council per se right now or anything like that. They need to have input from different content people. They need to have input from different councils who may end up inheriting the implementation of this strategy, either in all or in part. So one I've already mentioned is this chapter idea, the chapter strategy. And right now we are in the process of naming leads and having those leads name or find people interested within the membership to participate on these councils as they build out the strategy. We don't need a huge strategy team, but we do want well representation or good representation. So we've got the chapter strategy, and the way we're handling that is for each of these and the individual council strategies, we are providing from the executive council decision maker input. We know we're a volunteer organization, and so we're giving them the decision problem that we want them to work, the key questions we hope they'll be able to come back and answer once they flesh out the issues, and if there are any policies or given decisions that we need them to be aware of from the executive council and the board, and then we're kicking them off. So the chapter strategy group is calling around, talking to groups that meet in London, people that are interested in chapters and existing chapters and those chapter areas that want to start. They're getting lessons learned from Houston, and they're going to get some lessons learned from Calgary as well, since that one's going, and I'm sure we're going to hear from Seattle on things to improve and really how to make it beneficial to be a chapter, a win-win for SDP and a win-win for local groups of decision quality people. Community involvement is really going to have two important pieces. One is the decision quality facilitation for nonprofits. We see that touching the community is so important. We've had different members reaching out right now and working to help Harvey hurricane victim schools. The presentation in Houston this week from Houston chapter is how a member of SDP helped a school that had been flooded, a whole school from elementary to high school, figure out how to get their kids back in school safely as quickly as possible. We've got other people reaching out and starting to help nonprofits. We would just like a strategy around that. How can it benefit the organization? How can it benefit the communities locally? How can it enhance our skills around the world as we help the world? And then DQ community education. We see locally that the decision quality really is helpful when there's awareness and people can start being practitioners at a young and at an older level at the universities and kids that are members of our organization and other organizations. So again, this community involvement strategy will have two legs and they're kicking off. There is another idea that we call broader SWOT. How do we bring, if and how to bring non-decision professionals into SDP's fold, how they would be interested, whether they would be interested, what would interest them, how would our organization benefit, and how would it grow the use of decision quality globally. So that's kind of the idea there, and we're looking for recommendations soon. Okay? Last slide. For me, membership is growing. So all this stuff is just going on. We're getting calls from Hilda all the time. We're getting calls from different locations trying to do stuff, and there's just a lot of irons in the fire right now. I've already mentioned Calgary. I've mentioned Seattle. We've got nonprofit facilitation going on. It has been going on, and we're just trying to get our heads around it. Our goal for SDP is really to be an enabler and not to be a restrictive, but how can we enable this to happen globally? And please think about how you might want to get involved and help with this DQ impact. That's it for me.
Okay. Thank you, Ellen. This is Jim Driscoll. I'm going to say a brief word about what to expect in when I take over. But I want to start first by just saying what an honor it is to act as the Vice President of the Society. and what amazing leaders we have with Larry and Ellen. It's very humbling to take on this task, and I'll fall short of their example. But you know, as Larry mentioned, you don't really understand what it's like to run this organization until you sit in some of these seats, and it has been eye-opening. But despite that, you know, at every turn, I have just been amazed by the passion and energy of our membership, and am so proud to be a part of this organization, and I hope you are as well. Next slide, Hilda. So when we look into the second half of next year and beyond, you know, these things that Larry and Ellen have laid out will drive changes to how we operate. If you think about, we have a vibrant council, a set of councils, and we have an active board, and we've figured out how to help those two be aligned and stay coordinated. And now we're adding in chapters, and that's going to add a whole new element of how we keep people engaged, how we support those organizations, how we coordinate with each other, and that's certainly going to be something that will be a focus for me and the future board. We probably are missing processes and procedures that we'll need to help do that effectively. The nice thing is we have a skill set and a background as decision professionals that should help us effectively tackle that, make sure decision rights are clear, and that as we encounter these new decisions, we're making high-quality ones as efficiently and as effectively as possible. There's been discussion of social media. You know, that is an opportunity for us to help talk about what we do and to bring new people in, and we've got to have a focus there that is going to help us still maintain the professional communication and collaboration that we all love, but to make use of that avenue. And as we've talked about, I'd like to see a 3-year financial forecast, or something that allows us to get ahead of some of the programs and things we want to underwrite, prepare for those, and ultimately raise the chance that we'll execute on those things. So those are just examples. I'm sure there will be others, but my focus will be on that. And from a strategic standpoint, you know, I am not looking, based on what I see now, I'm not expecting to add new strategic elements. The things that Larry and Ellen have laid out here are what you know, I'm going to be working towards, and working with the board and working with the membership to try to make real. And I had a chance to visit the Houston chapter earlier this year, and it was an amazing experience. They've got quite a community down there, and I would like to see that for all of our members. I'd like to see it in my own hometown and help other people in our society participate in and grow a chapter in their local area. So that will continue to be a focus. We're going to look at this community involvement and help our members get out there and do good works in society, and showcase that effort, and from that bring new people into the society. We want to do more events. We want to do more activities to bring you know, different voices and different perspectives in, and help share what we can do, but also at the same time safeguard our professional standards and help other people achieve those. And overall, it's how can we grow our impact and grow the society and set us up for future success. And to that end, next slide, Hilda, just wanted to mention quickly that 2020 will mark the 10th anniversary of our founding. We have worked very hard to get to this point, and I hope you see what I see in the strategic plan, that this is an exciting opportunity for us as an organization. I'm excited to go drive it, but it won't happen without your active involvement. And so if what we have said here today resonates, please get in contact with us and you know, help us make this a reality. Okay, so next what we're going to do is get some quick feedback from you. So we're going to do a couple of quick poll questions, and I will take us through those briefly here. The first poll should be up on your screen. It just says, please select a single statement, so this is a single choice only, that best describes your viewpoint regarding the strategic plan. So please take a moment to give us some feedback there. See the votes coming in. All right, we'll go to the next poll question. Please select the statement below that best describes your views of the town hall format for this meeting. We'd like some feedback on what you thought of this as a format. Again, it's select the best answer that most closely represents your views. All right, we'll move to the last question. This is a multiple choice, this next one. So please, we'd like to know how we can assist you following this conversation today. And there are some choices here. You can select all that apply. A couple more seconds. All right. With that, I will turn it over for Q&A.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, so we've got a handful of questions here, so we'd like to spend the remainder of our time answering those for you. We hope you hang on for the rest of it. There are two questions right away regarding the reference to the Boy Scouts, and I was part of that early on, so I'll go ahead and kick off that. About 2 or 3 years ago, we started as a past Boy Scout leader. I was interested in seeing whether we could support Boy Scouts, even to the extent of perhaps helping them put together a decision quality merit badge. I started work on on this particular exercise you're seeing today, and we set it aside, but then the Decision Education Foundation, with support from Brian Putt, another longtime Boy Scout leader, have furthered that work. And we think that working with these organizations that serve our youth would be a very good use of our time, and we use that as an example of where we would like to see additional effort put as we go towards that future state. Okay. The next question, and maybe Ellen, maybe this is a good one for you. It says, why are local chapters such a big opportunity for SDP?
I think that, in my view, a lot of us met once a year and really enjoyed it and formed a sense of community. And the birth of the chapter idea really came from a person who went out to a course and said, hey, this is really weird. When they came back, that I'm not even in Houston, and there was more people from Houston interested in decision quality and taking this course than there was in Houston. How do we connect with people that are doing it in our own city? And this was years ago, maybe 3 years ago or 4 years ago at this time. And we said, you know what, let's host an event. Everyone come and meet each other, 1 or 2 people from different organizations, and see if they want to start meeting. And so we did that in Houston. We did that in London. And what I saw was, on their own, these groups decided they really wanted to start doing that. We then said, okay, let's see if we can find ways to make them a chapter. And it's been something that they're a community. Just as we all love going to DAG, or our annual conference, and seeing each other and sharing, these local groups enjoy it. London enjoys meeting. Calgary had a great time. It's a way to build a sense of community and to affect yourselves and your personal lives on more than once a year with others that are kindred spirits, and then touch the communities and help the communities that you live in to the extent the local group wants to. So it's amazing. And now that we've kind of put the word out, other locations are saying, hey, we want to meet, we want to see who's here. So I think it's very exciting, and it's really because people have enjoyed it.
Okay, thank you. There's a question here asking what a little bit more information about the Harvey School reopening. Again, Ellen, would you be able to address that?
Yes, a lovely lady, Eleanor Bergen, so I don't know if she's on or not, from Hess, wrote us right after Harvey, maybe within a month after Harvey, and she said, you know, and her email was real life framing, and she had attended our course back in 2011 and said, hey, this really happened. My child's school was flooded, and she's on the board of her church, so it's definitely a church school. She went to the first day, and the meeting was a disaster. Parents were upset, school was upset, everybody was upset. They met for, let's say, a half a day, and nothing happened. And she said, she just came in on day 2 and said, you know what, I want to try something, guys. We got to get something done here. And she used our regular framing approach that we all in SDP are so familiar with. And within 4 hours, they had framed up, did all the issues, and bucketed them and decided which were focused decisions and came up with alternative strategies, and then used a kind of a qualitative voting, and they had a strategy to go and execute and get their school up and running from the elementary, the junior high, and the high school. She's going to be presenting that as the Houston chapter's December meeting on December 7th. So anyone who wants to attend virtually that doesn't live in Houston, you can go to SDP's website and attend Eleanor's talk. And we've invited her to be a speaker in Vancouver, so she'll also be there in DAG. So it was just a very personal story on how much it helped. And we've had rabbis calling and a few ministers that are going to attend Thursday's meeting, or they're going to attend virtually. People are excited, and they're excited to just start trying to touch the community. So that's how it happened, and it was just an amazing story, but it's also the direction we want ahead. So very fortuitous. Unfortunate for Harvey victims, but very fortuitous.
Thank you. Okay, let's see, looking through the rest of the questions here, there's a question, well, Ellen, it looks like a good question for you as well. Is there a thought of a San Francisco Bay Area chapter?
Yes, and I even know who this came from, Mr. Brian. Another person who attended our Houston chapter meeting, just because the informed happened to be in town, was Brian Putt, and he liked the sense of community. He liked what he saw. And he said, hey, you know, can we start San Francisco Bay Area chapter? And the answer is, you all can start a chapter wherever you want. What we hope, and the poor Seattle is going to chime in here, I hope we're going to have some very soon quick procedures, probably initial procedures as a starter kit to help you get going. But really, if you want to start collecting solicitations of interest and have SDP help you find others, we have a nice way that keeps your own contacts private through SDP, but to help you find out who's there, who would be interested. And then you would follow Calgary and Seattle. You would do a solicitation of interest, have a meeting, understand the few givens and the support that SDP can give you, and just get started. Each location is really deciding what makes sense for them. So if you're there, get the word out. You want to get the word out, find out who might be your small seed coordinators to get it started and get going.
Okay, thank you, Ellen. So here's one regarding the certification and the broadening. Perhaps, Jim, maybe you would like to speak to that question. The question basically is, what do we really mean about broadening, and what are the sorts of things that we might consider?
Yeah, thanks, Larry. First, let me say I don't think there's discussion of major changes to our existing certification. It's really just how can we augment what we have, and how should we look at our certification as a way to help bring people in and support people's journey in learning how to do what we do and know what we know, and how can we provide more on-ramps or inroads for people into that certification process. So in the brief time I have, that's all I could say, but people can reach out to me for more information if they're interested.
Well, we have one more question here, and it says, what kind of changes do you envision with review of the mission and vision? And if that's okay, I'll go ahead and take that one. And really, the changes, if there is a need for them, I want to emphasize that. The changes that we're looking for really fall into two categories. One, does the text of the mission and vision support the things that we think that the membership is wanting us to do as a society? We want to make sure there's alignment there. That's a fundamental. The other one, and this is something that we've learned as we've gone through, as I mentioned earlier with the 501c3 status, is that if you go to a website, one of them's called GuideStar, I think it's guidestar.org, I believe it is, they keep track of all of the different charities with IRS tax-free status, tax-exempt status. And if you go through there, and you look us up, we are represented by our tax returns, and that's the only information we have there. If you go look up others that have taken the time to fill everything out, to get their mission and vision up there, it really tells compelling stories. It gives people a lot of information about what we stand for, what are we trying to do, what do we want to do, and how can they help. So to that extent, we may want to add language that would communicate to others, particularly people outside of our profession, to understand what we're about and what we can do to help them or to help others. So in terms of changes, those are the two potential areas of change that I could see people wanting to make.
I'd like to add something really briefly to that, Larry. Jim and Larry and I discussed this, and we've been working some straw man ideas, and we've taken that to the board. And our current thought is soon there will be a survey that is sent out to the entire SDP membership. And it will be a survey around the vision and mission and how potentially it could change. And based on that feedback, we're going to use the wisdom of the crowd to propose some modifications or not. So please look for that. We feel like this is big enough that if there was any change to that level, to any level, the organization needs to tell us what they want. And so you will have an opportunity at that point, and very soon.
Okay. Well, that is the last of the questions. Oh, when will the survey go out? It'll be in the new year. On there. So okay. So if there are no other questions, I think we've come to the end of our appointed time.
Oh, well, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes today's town hall meeting, and we hope that you enjoyed it. I'd like to thank our presenter for their time and contribution to today's event. I'd like to remind you that you may find the replay of this webinar in the Society's website at decisionprofessionals.com. Thank you for being with us today, and you may now disconnect.